Alright, good morning. First, I would like to thank Pastor Stocky for this opportunity to be able to preach to you this morning. You are there in Proverbs chapter number 1. Proverbs chapter number 1. The part of the sermon that we'll be focusing on is starting in verse number 5. The Bible reads, "A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels." And the title of my sermon this morning is as working as an assistant. Working as an assistant, or you can call this as assistants in the Bible. Well, this is a practical sermon, pretty basic sermon, but sometimes those basic parts of our lives are the most hardest parts, because we tend to make our lives complicated, and then sometimes the only fix to it are the basic parts to it. And sometimes we made our lives so complicated that it's just hard to go back to the basics sometimes. So it's it's a good thing that we can be reminded of this. This is a practical sermon. Maybe this is just too basic for you, but just don't zone out for me, because you can pick up something from the sermon. Because every time the Word of God is being preached, you can pick up something, maybe a single point to it, not the whole sermon, but a single point to it, or maybe a verse that was just brought up. Okay, so we'll be talking about assistants, how to be a good assistant, and how, because there's a lot of guys in the Bible, if you're just paying attention, that they rose up to fame, or they rose up to their positions, not just because somebody picked them up or they're just so lucky. They did the work. Okay. They followed the lead of something. For example, Joseph, he rose to fame in Egypt. You hear guys like Joshua, Samuel, or Elisha in the Old Testament, something like that. So the word assistant is actually not found in the Bible. Okay? And if I say Bible, I'm talking about the King James Bible. Okay? Because, if you read assistant in your Bible, you should have to find a new Bible, because the new and latest versions actually change all these equivalent words like, servant, minister, or helper. The NIV used the word assistant a lot in their version, because, they're making an update to the words, but there's no problem about the words servant, minister, and helper. Especially these words, they have specific, they're synonymous with assistant, but they have a specific meaning to them. That's why they're used as servant, minister, or helper, okay? And what I want to point out is that what I came across with making this sermon, because sometimes we devalue, okay? We devalue the word assistant as if it doesn't mean that much, For example, in schools, you might remember when they were in high school, elementary, we nominate the officers, right, inside the classroom for a section. So president. Especially for these higher positions, they have president, vice president. It doesn't, I want to be nominated as vice president. But when we go to like treasurer, assistant secretary, nobody wants to be nominated because they don't do anything actually, because the secretary or treasurer, they're the main person within the task. So we devalue this and we don't make anything much of it. But I'm telling you this morning, after you heard the sermon, maybe you will value much more the position of an assistant. Well, maybe you don't work as an assistant, like the role itself in the secular world, but I guarantee you that you're an assistant in any shape or form in your life, whatever stage of life right now. So you can apply this if you would just pay attention to what's being preached this morning, okay? So let's turn to 1 Samuel chapter number 17. 1 Samuel 17. And most of you guys may think, when you showed up, what is this ladder doing here in front of the, beside the pulpit? You might have wondered what it means. So I asked the guys last Friday to prepare this ladder for me so that I can use it for, some, as a prop to this sermon. Point number 1 is this. Point number 1, prepare. Prepare, so know what to do. We usually look down, as I mentioned, we don't value that much, because being an assistant is like take a second fiddle, or you're just following the lead. We think that it doesn't mean much, because you're just helping the main guy, right? And also, being assistant is like looked down in the society like it has less value. But you know what? There is more of a value to being an assistant. So you're there in 1 Samuel 17, verse number 20, the Bible reads, "And David rose up early in the morning, and he left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to fight, and shouted for the battle." So we see David here, point number one, prepare. So he rose up early in the morning. So that's one point to being an assistant, is you have to be prepared. And one thing to be prepared is waking up early in the morning. Okay? So we see David here. Then also he left the sheep with a keeper. Means he's prepared, and he, give the responsibility to the other guy. Turn to Psalm 84. Psalm 84. So as you're turning there to Psalm 84, I'm going to read to you another assistant in the Bible, Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 15. So turn to Psalm 84. 1 Samuel 3, verse 15. "And Samuel lay until the morning and opened the doors of the house of the Lord. And Samuel feared to show Eli the vision." So see another assistant here, rising early in the morning and then opening the doors of the house of the Lord. Psalm 84, verse number 10. "For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness." So you see here, we always quote this verse like, I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. Because we want to remind ourselves of how to be lowly, and, how to, not pursue all this opportunities in our lives. Maybe you have opportunity overseas, or, you have opportunities in other provinces in the country, but there is no good church, right? So you remind yourself, I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of Lord here in Manila than to move to these other places. But you know what though? That verse itself, is not like reminding us to be humble. Yes, the main part of it is being humble, but you know what though? There is more responsibility to being a doorkeeper. Remember, he wants to be a doorkeeper, right? And to be a doorkeeper, you have to show up early to open the doors of the Lord. Remember, right? So if you're I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord, and you show up late. So how do you open the house of the Lord, right? So it has more responsibility than we think about it. In order to close the door, you have to leave late. You have to allow everybody to leave the church before you can close the door. So he has a lot of responsibility. So even though he's just assisting, opening the door for others, he has a lot of responsibility to it. So don't look down to being an assistant like it's just a less value of a task. You're there in Luke chapter number 12. Luke chapter number 12. So let's read starting from verse number 35. "Let your loins be girded about and your lights burning, and ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord." So see, we are waiting for our Lord. "When he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately." So this is a big responsibility because we're waiting for the Lord. "Blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Verily I say unto you, that he shall gird himself and make them to sit down, and will come forth and serve them. And if he shall come in the second watch, or come in the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants." So see, even an assistant, he is required to be faithful as he waits for his Lord. So you don't have to turn there, but I'm going to read to you Proverbs 1 verse 7. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." So you're a fool if you despise, I don't want to be an assistant because, it's just following the lead of somebody else. You're a fool, the Bible says, because you know what though? Being an assistant, have wisdom to it. So every opportunity, I'm talking to you young guys or young ladies who want to go to the workforce, because eventually we're going to go to workforce, whether you like it or not, to support your family. Every opportunity to be an assistant is an opportunity to learn. And that's one of the important things. Because you know what though? If you go out straight from college or go out straight from high school, they don't value that much, okay? Right. You can put a tag to yourself and if that's not the tag the company wants you, then they're the ones who is gonna decide the tag because they're the ones to give you the salary, okay? So make the most of it. So what's the practical application? Point number one, to prepare. So what we can apply to this is, if you're an assistant, know what's the project that you are going to. Like, study in advance. You can ask for, materials, reading materials. Before you go to the actual job, you should have learned, or you should have at least an outline what is being done, okay? Point number two, you can bring your own tools. I'm talking about the secular job right now, okay? So maybe you're wondering. So bring your own tools. And as we talked this morning, you show up early, okay? Because there's nothing more annoying in a job site if the guys who will be assisting you show up late. There's nothing more annoying. Because you know what though, you young kids or young single guys or ladies, you know what? The managers, you know what? You look down at those managers because you always say that they don't work, okay? Because they're just sitting in their office. But you know what though? They have a lot of responsibility as well. And for a manager, good impression to you, he will not give you a task. He showed up, he doesn't have any tools, so what job I can give to him? Right. But if you showed up and then you have your tools with you, guess what? Even though this is not the job, or this is not the job that they're going to give to you, but since you have your tools, maybe they can consider and give you the job, so since you are prepared, showing up early, and you have your tools with you, okay? So take that in mind. Point number one, prepare. Turn to Proverbs 27. Proverbs 27. So you should have to be prepared. Point number two, pay attention. So this is a practical sermon, okay? Pay attention. Know what's going on, okay? Proverbs 27. Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. Turn to Genesis 40. So if you're not diligent, and if you don't know what's going on, basically if your flocks, they're sick, then they're going to die, or if there's a wolf, then basically they're going to be a prey to them. So you have to pay attention. So sometimes since we don't value that much the role of an assistant, we don't pay attention, right? It always happens to us. If we do in a secular job, maybe you're an assistant to somebody else, you don't pay attention, what you do? Sometimes you fell asleep, or sometimes you play with your smartphone, right? But I tell you, if you're in a job site, for example, in a construction, you have to pay attention. Because, some debris are falling, sometimes the frames or, some stuff like supports fall down, or somebody fell down from the second floor. If you don't pay attention, you're going to be in an accident. So pay attention. You see, another assistant here, Joseph, in Genesis chapter number 40, in verse number 6. So here's another guy who pays attention in what he does. Genesis 40, verse number 6. And Joseph came unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? So Joseph showed up early in the morning, and he first thing he does, he checks the welfare of the inmates. Okay? So maybe if they're sad, if they're happy. So he saw these two guys. These are the chief butler and the chief baker. So he asked them, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? So Joseph is really paying attention to the countenance of those inmates. Because you remember, if you're in a prison, would you just, care for other prisoners if you're in a prison? Because Joseph is not a worker here. He's the prisoner, right? So he just show up there in the morning and then just look for the welfare of every inmate in the prison house. So basically, this is the guy who pays attention. And Joseph, and they said unto him, verse number 8, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. You know what, though? This is one of the reasons why Joseph was promoted, because he interpreted the dream of the chief baker and the chief butler. Because you know what, though? If he's not paying attention, maybe Joseph was depressed because he was in prison, then he would not do anything. You would just sit there and look in the window and, count the days maybe of his stay in the prison house. So this is one of the good traits that an assistant should have, paying attention to what's going on. Turn to Genesis chapter 37. So see, this is not just the one time that Joseph is paying attention to what's happening, okay? Genesis 37 in verse number 2, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, these are generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock of his brethren, and the lad was with his sons of Bilhah, with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So if Joseph is not paying attention to what's happening, he won't have any report to relate to his father. Okay? So, and imagine, Joseph doesn't really, take care of the flock. His father tells him to go to his brothers, which actually take care of those flocks of Jacob to see their welfare. Okay? So, in that kind of task, you have to be really attentive since, maybe they're selling the flocks to, other people in the land, or maybe some flocks are not being taken care of. So that's why you have to be attentive, okay? So practical application, okay? So pay attention to what's being done. You know what though? The best way to learn is by observation, okay? Best way to learn is by observation. So that's why don't, look down at being assistant if you're just looking for somebody. Because you know what? Sometimes we're thrilled if you're the main guy, or you're the guy who holds the tool, something like that, or you're the guy who holds, or you drive the nails. But you know what though? Even though you're not the main guy who's driving the nails or holding the tools, pay attention to it. Because you know what? You're gonna learn a lot by observation and not just by taking some instructions. Okay? Pay attention. Think ahead. You assume what's gonna happen next if he's doing these steps. So that you can effectively assist. Because how can you assist, if you don't know what's going on? Okay. So I brought this. I asked the guys to prepare this ladder for me, for example, right? So let's just set this up. I'm not gonna climb this ladder, by the way. Okay. So I'm just gonna show this for example. Okay, so we don't have time. So imagine this guy is up in this ladder and he's fixing stuff. Like the last time we did, we drilled these hooks so that we can put the tarp for the banquet. And then he's doing something and then he suddenly stops. Okay, so you're observant. So why did he stop? I mean, is he gonna need a tool, or maybe he just lost power? Maybe the plug wasn't plugged, something like that. So you know what a good assistant is? Because since he's looking and he knows what's happening, he assumes that, maybe he needs, because he's putting the hook, maybe he needs a screwdriver, right? So a good assistant is just going to hand you the screwdriver. You don't even have to say something, right? Yeah. Or maybe, he needs to cut the wires, so maybe we can take these pliers and give it to him. So that's a good assistant. And you know what, though? There's nothing more like, you feel like fulfilling when you show up and you have your tools and then you give the right tool and then, man, I made him impressed, something like that. And also, it's not on your part alone, but also to the part of the main guy. Because, it saved him a lot of time thinking, and also it saved a lot of, giving instructions to you. Because there's nothing more annoying as well in the job site if you're bossing around. Because sometimes you're not that really bossy, but since the guys that's under you doesn't know how to do the work, it looks like you're bossy, and it's like you have a bad attitude. You say, hey, you do this, and then you go back and it's not still fixed. So that's one of the good points as well of being an assistant. So pay attention, know what's going on. Turn to Proverbs chapter 1. Proverbs chapter 1. See, these are basic points, okay? Proverbs chapter number 1. So this is our main text, by the way. Proverbs chapter number 1. A wise man will hear and will increase learning. A man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. Prepare. Point number 1, prepare. Point number 2, pay attention. And point number 3, pick up. So it's tied up with paying attention, pick up. What's pick up? So learn the trick. So that's how you learn a lot of stuff in the trade. For example, if you're in the construction business, is by learning from others. Okay? So I told you earlier, one of the best ways to learn is by observation. That's why we love watching videos, by the way. Because you know what? I want to learn to cook something, so let's go to YouTube. Okay? or I wanted to fix something, so let's go to YouTube. Because, it saves you a lot of time reading articles, stuff like that. If they just can show you for like how many a second to fix something, then it's easier. It saved you a lot of time. Some people would say to you, I am more of like a visual learner. Basically, they learn, they pick up a lot if they watch things, okay? Or some people would ask you, can you show to me how it's done? Because it's easier. And also sometimes, you guys, let's skip the theory part. Let's just watch and learn. Sometimes, because it's more easier, okay? You don't have to turn there, but in Proverbs 9, verse number 9, give instruction to a wise man, and he will yet be wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. So learning from the best actually in their trade. For example, these guys who work a lot, and they're the best in their trade. Because I noticed like the best guys actually in the trade are the worst teachers. You ever notice that? They're the best in the department, yet they're the worst teachers. So sometimes they can't really relay the message to you. But since you're observant and you observe them to do things, then they don't really need to teach you word by word. You can pick up those traits. For example, cleanliness in the area. That is something that is not taught frequently, for example. Maybe safety officers would show up around, ask people to, remove these hazard materials or, a safety concern material in the job site. But since people, they have already embedded that to themselves, the next guy or the assistant that is working with them always cleans the area as well. So they show up and say, why you have to clean the area when we were going to mess this up, by the way, since we're going to cut a lot of materials, we're going to drill a lot of holes. But since that's their practice, the next guy who is following their lead always cleans the area every time when they show up and then when they leave after the work. So that's easy, okay? Picking up, practical application. One of the best things, by the way, to pick up and to learn are the best practices and work ethics in a job site. Right. I'm not telling this in a construction environment. It is also applicable in an office environment, right? Work ethics, okay? I'm not telling you your attitude. Basically, you have to work with our attitude. But you know what? There's a lot of, work ethics and best practices that you can learn. One example, take notes, okay? This is another example of a basic thing that we tend to forget. Because, when we were in school, we are trained to take notes. But when we graduated in college, it's like goodbye notes, okay? Nobody cares about the notes anymore, okay? But if you don't have a note, take photos, right? Videos, they're helpful. Because, sometimes you tend to forget stuff, and then you have to go back. But you have videos, or you documented using photos, it's easy to, it's easier to go back. I mean, we paid a lot for these smartphones. It cost them thousands, and then we don't even maximize their capabilities, right? We have like 128 minimum na ba ang memory sa smartphone, and you can store a lot of images to it, and then all you can find is a picture of your pet or your selfies. We should maximize the use of our smartphones. We can use it for documentation. Right. I mean, the first time we have a digital camera, the old school guys. You show up to the job site, you have a digital camera, and even the LCD itself is so small, but it's so helpful that our boss have to invest in these digital cameras. Okay. And then we have a smartphone. I mean, digital cameras, you have to unload the memory card, right? And you transfer it in your PC, and then you send it to your boss. But now, smartphone, you can just send it via Messenger or Bluetooth, something like that. It's easier, but we don't maximize it. I mean, it costs us a lot of money. Turn to Numbers 11. Numbers 11. Point number 1, prepare. Point number 2, pay attention. Point number 3, pick up. Point number 4, propose. Propose, okay? So this is now what you mean by propose, okay? Proposal means make suggestions or ask questions, okay? That's one of the most important things as well. As an assistant, you're not just limited to following someone else's lead. You can make suggestions as well. Right. And actually, it's easier for the guy who works with you if you give suggestions, because sometimes he's so focused in working, he lost track of everything, and then he just did a mistake. And since you know that a particular action could lead to an accident, something like that, you just stop them, right? So it's very helpful. Ask questions as well. Numbers 11. Well, we're going to learn about, these assistants giving bad suggestions. Numbers 11. So these guys are not perfect. Okay, Joshua, Numbers 11, verse number 27. So this is when God asked Moses to ordain 70 elders in Israel. Numbers 11, verse 27. And there ran a young man and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad do prophesy in the camp. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Moses, one of his young men, answered and said, My lord Moses forbid them. And Moses said unto him, Envious thou for my sake? Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets, and the Lord would put his spirit upon them. Turn to Mark 9. Mark 9, another example was Peter. Okay? Peter here making a necessary suggestion. Mark 9, verse number 5. And Peter answered and said to Jesus, Master, so by the way, this is in the Mount of Transfiguration. It is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. For he wist not to say, for they were sore afraid. So these guys, especially Peter, they're assistant to Christ, and Joshua is an assistant to Moses, they give this bad suggestion. Okay, yes, you can give suggestion at work, but prepare to be rejected as well. So that's one of the traits as well. One of the traits that you have to just accept what they say to you. For example, if you give a bad advice. Okay, one example in the Bible, Ahithophel. You don't have to turn there, but in 2 Samuel, verse number 17, I'm just going to give you the outline. Since he gave this counsel to Absalom, Absalom didn't accept this counsel. So what he did? So he went to his house in his city, imposed his household in order, and hanged himself. So he just can't take, to be rejected. He committed suicide. Okay? So you can give suggestions, but be prepared to be rejected. You can ask questions as well. It's more important. It is important to ask questions because you don't want just to follow lead. Because sometimes, people in the workplace, they trick you sometimes. If you don't ask questions, you're gonna run into troubles. Okay. For some people, this is why it is important to ask questions. Because as I mentioned earlier, the best guys in the trade, they are bad at teaching. So you really have to ask them questions so that they can explain to you better. Or, sometimes people who knows that information is very important, they just don't give information to you. They wait for you to ask the information, and then they can give it to you. Okay? So it is important. By the way, you should be asking relevant questions, okay? You shouldn't be asking questions just so you can, ask questions for the question's sake, okay? Give suggestions that are feasible. It is important as well. Okay? So since you're assistant, limit your questions, by the way, because you know what? You don't want to be talking a lot in the workplace as well. So turn to Ecclesiastes 9. Ecclesiastes 9. So point number 1, prepare. Point number 2, pay attention. Point number 3, pick up. Point number 4, propose. And point number 5, perform. Okay? Perform. Do the work. So this is, by the way, one of the important parts. Ecclesiastes 9, verse number 10. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave, whither thou goest. Turn to Malachi chapter number 9. Just turn to Genesis 39. So sometimes we limit, our output since we devalue the work of an assistant, okay? So since we think, I'm just, following instructions maybe, or I'm just in a support role, so maybe just don't give your 100%, something like that, yeah? So every time, I think you have thought about this one moment in your life, you have reservations. So do I need to give my best, or, do I just need to give my 50% on this? But Ecclesiastes 9 says, do it with your might, right? Because you know what, though, even though we have a boss here that gives us our salary, who evaluates our performance, we have a much higher boss in heaven. And He is the one that we have to please because you know what? We're ambassadors of Christ in earth. So if you know what, if you're a fundamentalist, for example, because that's the big name given to us, the New Independent Fundamental Baptist, and people are, they're fundamental. But sometimes they're not fundamental at work. You know what I mean? You show up late, you time in, let's just take our, breakfast, for example. That happens all the time, okay? Yeah. But you know what, though? What we should be fundamental, because you know what? These doctrines, stuff like that, it's always been preached, we practice it. But sometimes we should focus on our secular job as well. We have these guys in our church, by the way, got kicked out. Then he preached a sermon. He preached both sermons, by the way, Pampanga and here in Manila. So most of you guys didn't hear the sermon because that was in the pandemic, but he preached about, when he was in a training, okay, in a work. So he was just an assistant, by the way, during the time. He's taking shadowing. And the person who was shadowing on the other end of the line was a sodomite, okay? So he preached like how he was so fundamental, like, he don't want to hear the voice of a sodomite, so he just end up the call. And, he told in his sermon how fundamental it was, the guy, not the guy, but the lady on the other side of the line is sodomite, so I just stop the call and I leave, okay? So is that the right thing to do in a workplace, for example? Because number one, yes, they're shadowing to you. You're not even facing to them. They're in the other end of the line. Okay? You don't know if they're in the other floor or in the other side of the cubicle or maybe in the other side of the world. It's just as shadowing. And shadowing, by the way, is like, you learn from somebody else. They share their screen to you or maybe you hear their call. That's a call center. So basically, you're hearing at the other end of the line. And by the way, that's not a homo conversation, okay? That's not a sodomite talking about filthy things, okay? They're going to shadow you to teach you how to answer a call from a customer, okay? So is that something that we want to show? Like, you even have to preach that? You have to teach other people to rebel against your boss, to cut the call? And by the way, you know what? This thing of, sodomites in workplace, they're everywhere. Maybe you shook their hands this morning when you're on your way to church, right? We just had a conversation yesterday in Intramuros, and I accidentally talked to a sodomite. So imagine that. And by the way, what if you're in an elevator in a, rush hour in the mornings? You can certainly that, the people inside that elevator are straight individuals. It's not, right? So what the point I want to showing to you is like, we're so fundamental in church, we're so fundamental in social media, but we don't show how fundamental we are when we work in our secular jobs, right? This is more important. You know what? There are guys in this church. I mean, I'm not guys, but men, okay? There are men in this church that are fundamental to the T, but they don't have problem in their workplaces, right? They don't cause troubles in their workplaces. I mean, they're wanted by their bosses. Yes, they do have, arguments about stuff. They stand their ground. But you know what? Their boss doesn't want to fire them, right? I mean, they're wanted in their workplace. So that's the part that you want to be a show. That's the part, by the way, that you want to reflect to others, that we are a Christian, that we're fundamentals, right? We do our jobs, okay? Not just because, we hate this certain kind of demographics of people. That's not even like a big deal to us because we're dealing with them every day. I mean, I just accidentally said to a homo that's like next to us in a jeepney. And what would you expect me? I would jump out of the jeepney? Because, there's an... right? So that's not the point, okay? It's being preached all the time, but with regards to our living, especially in our workplace, we have to leave impression in our workplace that, you know what, this guy, he's really fundamental. He hates sodomites. He don't want to get vaccinated. But you know what, though? One thing I can say unto him, He's our best guy. I mean, he shows up early. You know, he never get late. You know, he takes overtimes if I request him to get overtimes. And also, you know, he doesn't have any problems with the other, not church members, but the other teammates in the team. So that's one of the things. Because you know what, though? Let me read to you an article, okay? So this is an article about why most jobs are not posted, okay? Why most jobs are not posted. So this is a post from LinkedIn, okay? So they asked the most popular assistant of our time right now, they asked ChatGPT why most of the jobs are not posted, okay? So they asked ChatGPT. So I asked ChatGPT this question and below is their response, okay? In the industry books I read, the number is estimated as high as 80% for executive search firms and staffing agencies. The number is even higher. Midtown Search doesn't post any of our open positions from previous experience. I know positions oftentimes aren't posted because number one, job volume is so high. Point number two, it is a confidential search. Point number three, or no one wants to take the time to write a job description. So why does this matter? So ChatGPT's answer is this. It is difficult to estimate the exact percentage of open jobs that are not posted since the data varies depending on the industry, location, and company size. However, according to some studies and surveys, it is estimated that a significant percentage of job openings are not advertised or posted publicly. For example, a study by Career X Roads found that in 2019, only 33% of all job openings were filled through job boards and career sites, while the remaining 67% were filled through referrals, internal hires, and other methods. Another survey by JobVide found that in 2020, 36% of job seekers found their most recent job through a referral from a friend or a family members. So basically, 70% of job that is out there, basically they're talking about, you know, IT jobs and office jobs. 70% is not even posted. I mean, how much of a job that is? And only 30%. Because you know what though, you can see like in a Job Street or any Jobs DB, for example, Indeed, there's a lot of job postings, but most of them are just job postings just to post them since the government actually requires them to post those job openings. And also some of those jobs, by the way, are there just to collect information about salary ranges, work experience, and personal informations. And what I'm telling to you, why it is important to have a good impression in your workplace, because you know what though, even though you're a fundamentalist, and you know you stand your ground with regards to these issues, but if you have a good impression from your workmates, guess what? You won't have any problem looking for another job. Because you know what though, if there's another job opening, they're going to refer you. Why are they going to refer you? It's not because you're a fundamentalist. They're going to refer you because you have a good work ethic. And that's important. As an assistant, you pick up the part, perform so that you can be referred by other people. I can attest to that. You know, I'm just going to give a quick story. In 2020, you guys know that we've been praying for me to find a job. Okay? Pandemic 2020, I'm not employed. And then even in 2021, the first 4 months, I am not employed. I took a lot of interviews, okay? It's not that like, you know, I'm just, you know, hanging around and not looking for a job. I took a lot of interviews. I am pretty confident since, you know, I have a skill that's marketable. I took multiple final interviews, but you know what? I never had a single company contact me like, yeah, let's sign the contract. We're hiring you now. I mean, in my recent company, I even applied to this company multiple times, manager's interview, final interview, still not hired. But you know what though, my old teammate, he's my team leader, my former company. So he had a conversation with his son during dinner, and his son told him, yeah, we have a problem filling this open position. He said, this is the skill set, and we can just find somebody who speaks Japanese who does this job, okay? So his father thought of me, okay? So his father called me in the morning. He said, hey, my son had this open position, and maybe you can consider this job since you mentioned last time in our conversation you're looking for open opportunities. And I even asked him, no, yeah, he mentioned me the job description, and I said, this is not the type of skill that I have. Test automation. And he said, no, you've been doing this, right? But in our previous company, that's not my job because I'm a bilingual resource. So my job mainly is to translate, interpret, attend the meetings, organize the schedule, and once I'm done, I can go home. Okay? But since sometimes you're lacking like resources, so it is what it is. The deadline is tight, but since it's just testing, you do testing, okay? So yeah, you've been doing testing for all this time, and I'm reviewing your output, and I think it's fine. I can send your resume. So I told yes, you can try to send a resume, and then his son referred me to the company I'm employed right now, and his son is not an ordinary guy in the company since he's like an award-winning automation tester. So our company is a worldwide company. We does competition all around the world, and he won one time, and he was even rewarded to travel outside the country. And he referred me, not because I'm too good at testing, okay? I was referred by one of their best guys in testing. So that's the point that I want to point to you. I was referred, and then I took the interview, and then I was hired. So basically, I took like 4 final interviews from that company, applying online, and I wasn't hired. And then I was introduced, I was referred, and I got my job right now. Right. So imagine if, I have a bad record in my former teammate way back when I was in Fujitsu, and, do you think he would refer me to his son? Especially since he's an award-winning employee from that company. That's what the point I'm telling you. You should perform, and you know what? You should show how fundamental you are in your secular jobs. Okay? Turn to 1 Peter chapter number 2. 1 Peter chapter number 2. 1 Peter chapter number 2, verse number 18. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. Be subject to your masters, even if they're froward. Turn to 2 Kings. 2 Kings. So what's the practical application? Well, don't be lazy. What I'm telling you, be diligent. Don't be hasty as well. Work with quality and integrity. So by doing so, people will have a good impression of you. So not only prepare, not only pay attention, not only pick up, not only propose, not only perform, but lastly, pursue. Pursue. So what do you mean by pursue? Well, strive to be better. So look for ways to improve, especially in these workplaces, and set a higher goal for yourself. So let's see a guy who set a higher goal for himself. 2 Kings chapter number 2. 2 Kings chapter number 2. So this is Elisha. Verse number 9. And it came to pass, when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, ask what I shall do for thee, before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be unto thee, but if not, it shall not be so. So here, like Elisha is asking a double part of Elijah, okay? So Elijah alone, nobody of us, I think, can do the things that Elijah has done. But Elisha, he says, yeah, let a double portion of you be unto me, okay? And he did. He did a double portion of Elijah. Proverbs 22, verse 29, you don't have to turn there. You turn to Psalm 75. Psalm 75. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. Psalm 75. So take advantage of the working as an assistant. So it makes learning, and by the way, working as an assistant, it makes learning and obtaining specific skills easy. So why it's easy? Studying is hard. But you know what? If you're following the lead of somebody else, they have already laid down, by the way, the curriculum. That's true. They have already laid down. And that curriculum, by the way, whether it's in a practical set of job or in, computer-based jobs, that's the industry standard. Because, most of the companies right now, they're vying for ISO certifications. So it's all standard. So you don't have to make your own curriculum. So all you have to do is take an apprenticeship and pick up all those stuff, and then learn those stuff. And sometimes companies, they even give you free like perks for this. They give free materials to learn. They even offer like free hours. For example, if you're taking apprenticeships from your apprenticeship, you can take free hours, you can take these trainings. So it's easier, okay? So take advantage of it. Because if the path is already been laid, you don't have to reinvent the wheels, okay? Psalm 75. So not only if you do these things that I told you, you prepared, you paid attention, you pick up, you propose, you perform, and pursue. Last thing would be what? The last thing would be promotion. You would be exalted. By the way, go back to Genesis 41. Let's just see this story of these assistants that we've been looking to being promoted. Let's see Joseph's promotion. Genesis 41. Genesis 41. Starting in verse number 42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, bowed the knee, and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. See, we have been looking for Joseph's trait from all these points. And the end of his, what? Promotion. So he's the governor of Egypt now. Turn to Numbers 27. Numbers 27. So let's see Joshua's promotion. Starting in verse number 18. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take thee Joshua the son of Nun, a man is in whom the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, and all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. So this is when Joshua was promoted as well. So he took over the charge of Moses. So go back to Psalm 75. Psalm 75. Psalm 75, verse number 5. Lift not up your horn on high, speak not with a stiff neck. For promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is the judge. He putteth down one and setteth up another. So, you apply these simple things, the end is sure, you will be promoted. Now, I don't say you're going to be, right away promoted. I don't say that's sure. But you know what, though? If your secular boss or, the company that you're working right now or whatsoever position you are don't promote you, but promotion from God is sure. Okay? That's sure. That's given in the Bible. It is guaranteed. It might not be in the form of money. It might not be in a form of, treasures in earth, but, it might be a form of health, right? It might be a form of schedule. Maybe you found grace in the eyes of your manager. He would allow you to have a flexible work arrangement, for example. Because sometimes we pray that we have like a flexible working environment so that we can join soul winning, we can attend church services. Maybe that's one. Or maybe they can just promote you literally. So all these things, turn to Proverbs 22. All these things that we had, I might left off some of the details, but you know what, all these things, they can apply to it. You can, as an assistant. So, Proverbs 22, verse 29. So, we have actually read this prior to this. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings, he shall not stand before mean men. You know what? This guy in here, so he don't make business with ordinary people, okay? His customers are kings. He mentioned here, kings are leaders of the country. So if you're making business with kings, imagine how much, respect people outside the world has to you. Because, the kings request you to do jobs for them. I mean, you must be a guy that works not just hard, but, your output stands out from the others. Right. And, that part, that skill you can pick that up by just being an assistant, by following someone else's lead. So don't look down, okay? So after you listen to this sermon, do you still think that assistants are not important? They're important, okay? Is it of low value? They're of high value, okay? I mean, I give this ladder, for example, if you keep those things in mind and observe them, by the way, one of these days, you will be that guy who will be climbing up this ladder. And there will be another assistant right next to you that will be assisting you, okay? So that's the one way as well to get up the corporate ladder, so to speak, It's by being a good assistant, picking up tricks, you started preparing, paying attention, you pick up those tricks, you proposed, you perform, you pursue, and then you later got promoted. So let's close with a word prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this opportunity you've given me, Lord, to preach for the Sunday morning service here in Verity Baptist Church, Manila. Lord, help us, to apply these words to our lives, especially for us. We sometimes look down the role of an assistant, but as we saw right in your word, the guys who lead Israel to become eventually leaders were once assistants who has been faithful to their leaders. Lord, I pray help us to apply this, especially for us in the workforce, Lord, to show how fundamental we are, not just in doctrines, but also working, being diligent, and showing them how a real fundamental works in the workforce. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.